Hey everybody, this is Tom Richardson and my guest again, Seth Paulson. We talked about the Batman film series recently, and for this video, we're actually going to talk about our all-time favorite film directors. What Seth and I did is we came up with a list of favorite directors that both he and I liked, and what we did is we chose 5 directors in common that we both really appreciate. There's other directors out there like Steven Spielberg, James Cameron, Francis Ford Coppola that we both really love. But these 5 directors that we're about to talk about, Seth and I just love almost every film they've worked on, at least for the most part. And yeah, we really want to talk about those guys with you today. So first off, guys, since we just got done talking about Batman, it'd be appropriate to talk about Christopher Nolan first. I'm going to talk first, and then I'll let Seth talk about Nolan. But I think Nolan is very good about knowing what's real and what's fictional in a story. Kind of like the film, I think Inception's a good example of this, where he's able to make it feel real, but he also is aware of he needs to have surreal imagery, he needs to have abstract imagery, and I think he's very good about handling both forms of stories, and he's able to tell both of them in a very visually appealing, very dialogue-driven, that's well-written dialogue. And just his style is very appealing to me, and I'm going to let Seth talk about him because I know he really likes this director as well.
Yeah, I would definitely kind of, go off of Tom's point. I think he's definitely a real, dialogue, kind of director. And I think, you can definitely see that kind of style in his films, such as the Batman trilogy and Inception, how he likes to play off, this realism, but on top of realism, he always likes to push the boundaries where he has a story, he has a plot, but he also wants you to kind of think. And it's kind of nice because some of his films too also kind of have not necessarily an alternate ending, but they also have like an ending where it can be perceived as like it can have like maybe two different endings based on how the film ends. But
Inception's a good example.
And Inception is a good example too.
Even Dark Knight Rises, I don't want to spoil it, but that kind of has an ending like that.
It kind of does, and it kind of doesn't. But I think just overall, yeah, Christopher Nolan's a fun actor, and I think he's one of the most
fun directors.
One of the most fun directors too. I think just because I
don't think he's ever acted in anything.
So
I don't think he's ever acted in anything. I think he's just a director.
No, I think he's always been
director.
He's always been behind the camera.
Director and writer.
Yeah. But I think he's definitely one of the brightest and up and coming directors that it'll be interesting to see actually what he does out. Since he just finished up the Dark Knight, see actually what films he actually comes out with. Besides a superhero trilogy. So
it's already been rumored that he wants to make a Howard Hughes biopic similar to The Aviator, and he wants to make a James Bond sequel. So I think both of those would be very cool.
I saw that post on Facebook he does. So James Bond, huh? Wow.
That would be cool. If he could do justice to James Bond the same way he did with Batman, it'd be really cool.
I guess, I don't want to get off topic, but I think one thing, if he does do a James Bond, one thing I've actually noticed what he did with the Dark Knight and, trilogy, he kind of he added that humor where you can actually understand it, like where it was, compared, a humor that you get and you actually laugh at compared to like dry humor, which is kind of like, the new Daniel Craig thing. So I think that's something that I would really love to see back in the old Bond films.
Well, I just think he would have a very realistic Bond story too. Like he would, but like it's a good example. Is the reason why I didn't like Quantum of Solace as much as Casino Royale is a good example would be there was just so many scenes in because Quantum of Solace that just simply weren't believable. I didn't believe a guy riding a motorcycle going on all those boats, and he could still be on top of that motorcycle and everything else, and still be on there and still go after the villain. Well, even in Casino Royale, there was an occasional scene or two that might have been a little corny, but it just didn't have that over-the-topness of the guy riding the motorcycle all over those boats. I think Nolan would be much better about doing that kind of stuff.
Besides going off track, I think overall Christopher Nolan's a good director. And like I said, you can definitely see that with an Inception and Dark Knight. And of course, I only say that because those are basically the only films I've seen with Christopher Nolan. But I've heard other films such as Insomnia and Memento. I've heard those are really good.
The only Nolan film,
those films.
The only Nolan film I haven't seen yet is The Following, which apparently is his first film he ever did. I think he had like a limited budget on it, and I guess out of all his films, rating-wise, it has the lowest rating of all his films. Following. It has no famous celebrity because I think it was made in under. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Comment below. Feel free to. I think it was made in under $5,000.
Really?
That's because it was Nolan's first movie, so he had to prove himself as a director. But anyway, guys, we love Nolan, and the next director we're going to talk about is one that actually is from all the way back from the 70s, is John Carpenter.
You know, I think with me, John Carpenter, the reason actually why I picked it, not just because I think he's a good film director. I think, nowadays, I think he's kind of past his prime, just to be honest.
He did do The Ward like 1 or 2 years ago, but it wasn't as huge as, let's say, like Halloween or Starman. So.
And I think that's what he's always going to be known for, is his B/C, whatever grade you want to give him, but definitely campy films. But I think definitely the film that he will always be remembered is for Halloween. And actually, one thing I loved about Halloween is actually it made a lot of money. I mean, of course, it's not like on the list of like the most, profitable movies ever made. But the film actually was, I believe it didn't really cost a lot to actually make the film.
And that's why actually Carpenter was allowed to make it, because I saw in a special features interview with him, he said they were only given a certain amount of money to make it. It's funny too. On every scene that involved leaves on the ground, those were hand-painted leaves. Wow. And so they had to retrieve every single leaf off the set when they were done filming because they didn't have the money to replace those painted leaves. Because they had to film the movie in the spring and not in the fall, which is what they originally wanted to do, but Carpenter had to prepare the film over the spring.
And I remember actually, I think after the film was actually completed, now this is actually when...
Also, a funny thing to note, the first scene in the movie with Michael Myers as a boy, that was the last scene shot for the movie.
Really?
And you know why? I mean, I'm even surprising him now. I've heard that the reason they did that was because, I guess, after all the scenes with Michael Myers chopping knives in the wood and everything, and the set was ruined at that point. And even then, I think because they had like a fresh coat of paint on the walls or something. So they figure, why not shoot it as our last scene? I mean, we have just one scene left to shoot. It's the first scene too. And also because they had to prepare it right away, because they had to get the impression that you were watching this small boy walking up the stairway, and they had to do it just right. I think that's the reason why they waited so long to film, is because they had to prepare it for so long.
Oh, that's funny.
And funny note too, Deborah Hill, who was the producer of the film, said in an interview she was actually the person that had the small boy hands, because at the time she had really small hands.
Oh yeah. Well,
and Deborah Hill produced the film.
Yes.
She did She wasn't obviously Michael Myers, but every scene where you see like the knife stabbing, or you see Michael Myers grabbing the mask off the ground, that was Deborah Hill's hand. Yep.
I remember also with the film too. I remember after they had added sound, they actually I believe they actually showed it to a group of college students. Without the sound, of course, because basically the sound is actually what made the movie too. Like some of the most jumpiest parts, like where it's like, like that 80s synthesizer.
Funny thing to note about the musical score, John Carpenter said he came up with the score because, he said when he was younger he had a pair of bongo drums, and his father always taught him his rhythm when he was warming up. And because he only had I think he only had a day to make the score for the movie, so he had a very small time to make the score. So what he did is, well, since it hasn't been used for a movie yet, I'll just use what my dad taught me as a warm-up for music.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So that's why he went to the piano and quickly did that little score, and that became the score for the movie.
So besides, John Carpenter's, his film that he will always be remembered for, I guess in my opinion, which is Halloween, but I remember actually when he had made the sequel, and I kind of liked the sequel, I kind of didn't, because I believe
he didn't direct it. He was the producer.
Oh, he was a producer, but I remember actually, so anyways, since he was a producer, I remember I had watched a documentary, and he's like, well, I really didn't want to do Halloween 2, but the only thing that really kept me, going was, a 12-pack of Miller Lite at night. And actually, he's like, he was so serious, and I'm like, oh, that's funny, because it just looked like he just didn't even want to do a sequel, because of course Halloween was.
And that's why he didn't direct it, because he didn't want to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but so besides Halloween,
Starman's a good one.
I haven't seen Starman. The Thing, actually, I just watched.
The Thing was a big one by him.
I just watched that last Halloween.
And remember in the original Halloween, you see clips of The Thing played on TV as the kids are watching TV.
Yes,
and that's because I don't think he was working on the film yet, but I know at the time he wanted to do a remake of The Thing, and that's why he showed clips of the original, because that was his foreshadowing, saying, hey, in the future, I want to make a remake of The Thing.
So that was basically almost a spoiler for fans, like, oh, wait, why is he showing that? Okay, that's kind of cool. I think in that film too, didn't they show? Oh no, no, no. That I think I'm sorry. That's actually the next director we'll talk about, but I'll talk about that later.
Oh, Wes Craven.
Wes Craven
Okay.
when they showed the Night of the Living Dead.
You know who
On
actually made
TV.
that? That was George A. Romero.
That was Romero, but I'm actually talking about in actually Nightmare on Elm Street, where they actually
Okay.
when Nancy was watching like the TV.
No, you know what that was? That was Evil Dead by Sam Raimi.
Was it Evil Dead?
That was Evil Dead.
That was Evil Dead. I think
Similar film.
One of
like
the films did show like Night of the Living Dead, I believe.
Either way, she was showing some watching old
Yeah.
horror
Well,
films.
either way, I mean,
Yeah.
I know that's kind of irrelevant, but still. But anyways, yes. The Thing, Halloween. Trying to think some of the other films. Oh, by the way, I don't know what you guys think, but I thought they were fun, but they were definitely very campy. With the escape from New York and Escape from L.A.
Oh, did Carpenter do those? Yeah, you're right. He did do those.
That starred what's his name?
Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell, yes. Which is ironic because actually he's one of my favorite B films. Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny, but yeah. So yeah, those films, and I'm just trying to think of any other films you can think of.
Well, like I said, I was mentioning Starman earlier. If Seth doesn't know what it is, I can actually explain what it was. Is Jeff Bridges played a deceased husband to a woman played by Karen Allen, who was in Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones' love interest, and she lost her husband. And what's funny is I've actually been to some of the places that the film was at because they filmed it in Wisconsin, and so. Yeah, so it's like, wow, man, I need to go there now. But anyway, we're almost to the 12-minute mark, so I'll try to quickly talk about it. But pretty much, Jeff Bridges played he played a deceased husband. He died from a hunting accident of some kind, I believe. And there's an extraterrestrial that crash lands on Earth, and this alien crash lands next to this woman's house, who was played by Karen Allen. And he's kind of like a spherical ball figure that floats around. And he finds a hair strand of DNA of her husband's old hair since, I think it was like a few weeks after he died or something. And so it turns out he can scan any form of DNA, and whenever he scans, he becomes himself. So it ends up he becomes the husband played by Jeff Bridges, and the wife still thinks he's alive. And so it turns out later on in the film, as it progresses, she finds out he's an alien and that he only has a few days left before he has to return to his home planet, because if he stays on Earth too long, he'll die because he's not used to our bacteria and everything. Mm-hmm. Very good film, very big cult classic, favorite of mine. Like I said, I've been to some of the locations they filmed it at. So when we come back, you guys, we're going to talk about Alfred Hitchcock, Wes Craven, and the Farrelly brothers when we come back.